We're back. I'm here with Jim Clancy. He is the chair of the Chelmsford Finance Committee. We appreciate coming on Town Talk.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a big time of year, I assume, for you guys.
It is. So we meet twice a year, actually. We meet for both town meetings, and we meet if there's a special town meeting. So the more intensive of the two town meetings is the spring town meeting, because that's the one where we vote on the budget. And so starting in January and going through February and March, we meet. Our liaisons go out and meet with the different department heads. We have warrant article presenters come and present to us, and we discuss the budget, we review the budget, and ultimately we vote our recommendations and prepare our book, which I have a copy with you here, to explain why we voted the way we voted at town meeting.
Now you guys literally go through every single warrant article one by one, and I know you guys call people in, correct?
Correct.
And discuss each one and the merits and what they are. I assume that's pretty time consuming overall?
It can be, because not just at our meetings, which you see, which are published, we have either one or two people, or sometimes even three for the two school districts, go and meet with those departments, with the schools, review their budgets, discuss their wants, their needs, and how they formulated it, make suggestions, but ultimately review what they have presented to us. And all that happens behind the scenes prior to them coming and presenting to the whole committee, so that we can review, have that discussion, and ultimately on our final night before we make our recommendations, discuss why we're making them, have a rational decision behind it, and really formulate our position so that when we're asked at town meeting what our recommendation is, and we're asked to further describe why we did that, we're able to do so.
Now, how big is the board? Is it 9 members? Or?
7 members. And then we have Pam Morrison, who's our clerk and takes all of our notes, and she does a fabulous job making sure that we're on time. It's always a struggle every year getting through. Pam, I'm sorry, it's mostly my fault. Trying to get the letter together to make sure we haven't just given the warrant with a couple of quick blurbs, but really described why we reached the recommendation we reached, and more importantly, to point people, and especially town meeting representatives, to different locations to find the information that they need to review if they want to expand further their knowledge before making their votes at town meeting.
Now, you guys are kind of like an independent committee, right? Because you're actually appointed by the moderator.
We are. So we are special members of the town. So we fall under certain requirements when we're appointed. We have conflict issues, just like any other board would have, that we have to address. We have to recuse ourselves if there's an issue. If someone has a family member that's involved, they would have to state that and have a determination as to whether or not there's a conflict. We go through that same training every year. We go through not only the conflict, but also make sure that we're apprised of all the current regulations that are involved with those discussions for special town employees. Because we're not a town employee, but we are appointed, and although we make our recommendations based upon our recommendations for the town, we do act in some capacity like a town, not necessarily an employee, but an appointed member. So yeah, you're right. The town moderator, who's John Curlin, he approaches us. We're on a 3-year schedule, and what he will do is he will vet. He will go through a interview process. He'll discuss what that person's positions are, but also what their background is, and really try to put together a good group of people with a varying degree of backgrounds. Because ultimately, we're tasked with acting as the town's watchdog and doing a more in-depth search into the various warrant articles and the budget for the town, so that we can point to different things for the town meeting representatives who may not be able to go more in depth or have the time to commit to do so.
Now, you guys have to go through a pretty extensive budget, right? And I talk to me a little bit about the capital budget, because I think that's the one that I think people see a lot of the things that are purchased, right? We're talking about trucks and all sorts of good things that are on the road. So.
You're right. It comes up every year, and people wonder, do we really need to purchase this? What are the clock hours versus what are the miles on a vehicle? Is this expenditure wise at this juncture, or can we put it off for another couple of years? What I want to say is that the committee that's put together, the Capital Planning Committee, is a great committee. We send a liaison who acts as a voting member to that committee. The last couple of years it's been Kathy Dovett, and she does a wonderful job. John Souza is the chair for that. And they have hearings just like we have hearings. They meet after town meeting in the fall for a couple of weeks. And they really go through the 5-10 year plan, and they look at things that have been on the list for 3 years and see what the priorities are, but also what our bond capacity is. So they say, okay, well maybe this is coming off our bond schedule for this year. What do we have available, and what can we go out to bond for? And what's really needed in order to make sure that we're not just repairing when something breaks, but really taking care of things before they break, and making sure that we're staying on top of preserving what we have. So the two, I think, big ticket items that we have in the capital plan this year is the replacement of a fire engine. It's come to the end of its useful life as a first engine. It'll be put in the back. They'll rotate one out. And that is the biggest purchase on the capital plan. But it needs to be noted that we have a lot of engines and fire trucks that are coming offline in the next 5-10 years, because we had a big purchasing, 10-15 years ago. They do come to the end of their useful life. They need to be maintained and replaced. The mechanics at the fire department do an excellent job in maintaining them, but vehicles eventually run out. And so we're starting that process and making sure that we aren't all of a sudden doing 5 trucks at one year, or things are breaking down and we're having to scramble to repair and replace. The other is the town hall roof. It's a need repair. Anyone's been in there can see any leaking or any end of the useful life of that roof. So that's the other big ticket item on that. But like every year, there are items for the schools, for all our buildings in town, and we want to make sure that we're doing our job in maintaining those assets of the town, so that there isn't a time where everything is crumbling and there's a big issue.
Now, do you get into the minutia of like whether or not a particular department needs, say, I don't know, I'll make this up, like an F-250 versus an F-150? I mean, is there, do you question those type of purchases, or?
It has come up, but it's within reason. You have to, at a certain point in time, trust the people that have been hired to do these jobs. They know what they're doing. They're on the front line every day. We have an excellent set of town employees, and they understand what needs to be done in order to maintain and keep that level of service funding with good use. Our department heads do a fantastic job, and for the most part, when they receive the recommendation from our town manager, Paul Cohen, and from John Souza, and they sit down and they have those discussions, they understand what we have available and what needs to be done first and what can be done within reason. And so, unless there's something really egregious that pops up, ultimately we'll say, well, let's talk about this certain item. Is it something that's necessary, that has to be done? And for the most part, usually there's a valid support for it. So, kind of on that line, there are 2 new positions that are being proposed in this year's town budget. And we had a lengthy discussion about both of them. And we not only had those at our meetings, but our liaisons had them with the departments which would be affected the most. One is the OSHA representative for the town. And a lot of us were skeptical when we heard about that, because when you add persons to the town, it adds to the budget and it adds an ongoing cost to the town. And the impetus behind that was a change in the regulations. So OSHA regulations are going to be applied and going to be continued to apply to the towns and municipalities in Massachusetts. And the funding this year is through funding that's provided by the state. After this year, the funding is going to be coming from fines. The process is easier. for the fines to be had. Anyone that's licensed as an OSHA inspector can go and note a violation. And the concern is that in order to prove that you're taking care of those issues and that you're doing your due diligence, you have to have the paperwork behind it and the training to show that you've done it. It's very intensive, and it's the position of multiple department heads that they wouldn't be able to do it within their own budgets and with their own personnel. So there'll be a new position that's being suggested by the DPW. It'll be under the DPW, who will start and make sure we're currently trained, but also making sure the paperwork's done, everything's properly documented, and ultimately that everyone's being safe, not only in the Department of Public Works, but also in the school kitchens and things like that. There are multiple places where employees need to be taken care of. They need to make sure that they're safe environments that they're working in, and that the town is making sure that they're taking care of that ultimate liability, which, being an attorney, I'm concerned about liability. The other position is a community services coordinator. The thought process behind this position, it'll be under the town manager's jurisdiction and the town hall. This person's going to help people fill a need that's currently not being filled, and that's direct them towards services, both social and emotional, that can help them in times of crisis. Lots of times people have an issue, they have a problem, and they don't know where to turn to. And this will be that kind of person. And again, we were skeptical when we first heard about it, and we wanted to know more about it. And one of the key things that helped in our decision to support this position was speaking to the Chief of Police, Jim Spinney, and he mentioned that calls for the police department have increased time-wise over the past 5, 6, 7 years. When you go to a call, you're not going to be there for 5, 10 minutes. You could be there for 45 minutes because you're dealing with a social, emotional issue that needs to be handled properly. They need to go through and make sure everything's addressed and make sure the follow-up is going to happen. There's no one on the town level to help make sure that there's someone that they can go to for follow-up. And they believe that this person will help decrease that time that's spent on those types of calls and be a better source for helping what is really a mental health crisis that we're dealing with nationwide.
So it's not necessarily about servicing town employees, it's about being a service to the community?
Correct. It's not the town employees, although it's available to town employees, of course.
Right.
It's about the community at large. It's a position that anyone in the community can go to and can get direction towards the services that they might need.
Wow. That actually sounds really useful. I have a friend that's a Portland police officer, and he's talked a lot about how a lot of things are mental health based, you know, and it's not necessarily about arresting people, it's trying to get them pointed in the right direction, and you know, there's only so much follow-up they can do, right? So, so how did your committee ultimately vote on those positions?
We voted 6 in favor and 1 abstention. It's an overall vote on the whole town budget for that warrant article.
I see, yep.
The abstention was a concern over the process behind the OSHA representative. Our abstending member, although supported the idea behind the position, thought we might be able to do it a different way. And we have explained that in our Finance Committee handbook, which is available online at the town website.
If people want to check out your meetings, when do you generally meet?
So we meet during budget season almost every Thursday at 7:30 over at Town Hall. We post our agendas usually two days in advance, as we're required to do for open meeting laws. We don't post them earlier because sometimes we have last minute changes based upon who's available to come in for those warrant articles. So we go through usually end of January straight through end of March. We make our recommendations, we post those, we put our book out. And then we'll meet again in the fall, usually starting in September, going through to town meeting, making sure we get our recommendations out in a timely manner. But we also meet sometimes the night of town meeting if there's something that's been a holdover, if there's an issue that needs to be addressed that doesn't have all the final information for it. We do that regularly. And in fact, we have a special town meeting that's going to be held during town meeting regarding one of the issues that's popped up for a pilot program for, I believe it's for the solar panel farm, how the tax is going to be paid and what the recommendation is for that. We're going to hold our meeting prior to town meeting at 6:30 over at the senior center. And we do that normally, we do that regularly, we post it, and sometimes town meeting members come and sometimes they don't.
Well, you gave us a really good overview. We have one more guest, so we appreciate you coming
Sure.
on, and certainly we appreciate everything you do from an oversight for the town as far as our town finances. You've done a fantastic job. So
Thanks, Joe, appreciate it.
thank you, Jim.